The Office is one of my favorite shows, so much so I find myself randomly quoting lines in my everyday life, like, break me off a piece of that... Football cream? Applesauce? Poison tree? Wait, really? I've seen that scene like 20 times and I still can't remember what it was. Weird. But then I got to thinking, maybe the reason I can't remember it is because I'm an NPC. It stands for a non-player character. If you've never played a video game in your life, congratulations, you have a life. Basically what they do is just walk around doing nothing. They're just there to fill the streets, the scenes. Without them, a game would be insanely boring. It'd be like that movie, I Am Legend, where Will Smith loses his mind so bad he starts shooting at mannequins. The only company he has left. Come to think of it, I think it was for the best he didn't find anyone alive. Maybe I'm just playing a part in somebody else's life or game, and at some point they'll come to me for a quest, and that's the only meaningful thing I'll ever do. What a ridiculous thought. I'm not an NPC. You know who is though? The security guard in the office. And okay, with the security guard it was easy. But I thought, who else could be an NPC in The Office? Basically, not a main character of the game called The Office. Deciding just who is and who isn't an NPC was quite tricky at times. Even with someone as obvious as Michael Scott, a very likely main protagonist or main player, so to speak, it's not really easy. You see, Michael is a manager, but he's got basically no real power since he can never fire anyone unless corporate wants him to. He tries to get rid of Toby, Stanley, but it never works. And that gave me the idea that Michael must be an NPC, because usually NPCs don't have real influence over the story. Even with Tony, the guy quit himself, only after was Michael able to fire him. Michael also has a catchphrase, which is common in NPCs. The AI is usually programmed to respond in a certain way, once triggered. For Michael, that's anything remotely sexual, and he'll respond, "That's what she said." Then I got to thinking, I got to more thinking. I was already thinking by this time. If Michael were an NPC, he would have had proper navigation called Navigate Mesh. It's also called Nav Mesh, which is a path and an obstacle calculation made by the AI agents to cover a certain path. There was a time when Michael and Dwight are on a quest and are visiting old clients, offering them gift baskets to win them back. They come to a crossroads and the GPS is telling Michael to turn right. Dwight warns Michael that the GPS means not now, later. But Michael trusts the game UI so much that he just drives into the lake. This is like following a waypoint marker on a minimap and walking straight off a cliff. When you literally see that, there's a cliff there. You probably should have been paying attention, and now both you and your horse is hurt. See, an NPC wouldn't likely do this kind of mistake unless they're bugged out, but in this case, Michael stops and thinks for a second. But I needed more proof. Was Michael a real player of The Office? You see, NPCs are usually the same, like their outfits only change during events, but Michael, his inventory is filled with fashion items. He has wigs, dolls, costumes, bandanas, possibly spending his hard-earned gold on cosmetics. During his blind date, when Jim and Pam invite him out for drinks and they have this lady with them, once he realizes that it's a date, Michael puts on his Kangol hat to boost his charisma. But that's not how the charisma mechanism works. He very likely skipped the tutorial due to it reminding him of Toby or something. Prison Mike, for instance, he wears a bandana and thinks his intimidation has increased when it just... You know what? That time it actually worked. Don't mess with Prison Mike. Okay, so Michael turns out he's a main player of the game, but why does he suck so much? I mean, he never progresses, right? Never even gets a raise until Daryl, another possible NPC, helps him in the get a raise from your boss quest. Well, the answer was in front of me the whole time. Michael is a newbie, or noob for short. Someone who sucks at the game. Doesn't matter how long they've been playing, they're basically heart stuck in a certain division or mission, which they struggle to complete. Michael's mission? Find a lover, be content, be happy. If you know MOBA games, multiplayer online battle arena games like Dota 2 or League of Legends, you get it. And if you don't, again, must be nice. I wish I didn't get it. But I know exactly how Michael Scott is feeling every single day. You see, I was also stuck playing League and Platinum basically forever. Then they updated the divisions and turned it into Emerald. So the losers like myself would think, wow, I made it to a higher division. And we did indeed feel a lot better, most of us. Just like when Michael felt when he was promoted to co-manager alongside Jim, only to realize that the promotion was actually a demotion. And Michael is not just a noob, right? He's an entitled noob that thinks he's really good at the game and blames the MMR system, the matchmaking rating. Basically saying things like, if I wanted to, I could easily grind the corporate ladder, but I choose to stay here with you guys in the lower leagues. Also, once I realized Michael was not an NPC, I noticed how his catchphrase was just him wanting to say the exact same joke over and over again. Michael's problem is he's using the chat function way too much, constantly making uncomfortable jokes, even sexist ones, instead of focusing on his gameplay. And every time he gets away with a slap on the wrist, no ramifications whatsoever, because he's practically a streamer if you think about it, with the cameras around him. And if you know streamers, well, they're usually less likely to get banned than us ordinaries. But the question still remains, am I an NPC? Probably not. But I'm playing this game called YouTube, and to proceed with my next quest, I need your help. Please subscribe to the channel and like the video, that way I can complete my quest and start farming some gold from that endgame boss called Google. Thank you, my fellow warrior. How about Michael's loyal assistant, regional manager Dwight Schrute? Assistant to the regional manager, sorry Prism Mike, won't happen again. The title is meaningless, almost like a fake cosmetic item that Dwight puts on. It doesn't really give him XP, it doesn't give him gold, it doesn't really give him anything, not even respect, you could say. But he clings to it anyway. It's because he's an NPC? I'm not sure, but one thing I know is that he's not a noob. In fact, Dwight might be one of the more hardcore characters of The Office playing the game. Not just selling paper, the guy is playing The Office to the max, completing any side quests he can find, like farming, doing martial arts, even something as chill as watering the plants. If this is an NPC, he's quite an advanced one. When he's given the tasks of picking the new healthcare plan for everyone, he minimizes resources, almost like he's trying to save on gold so the company can have higher earnings. NPCs love to keep the boat afloat. Dwight does, however, prepare for possible battles, aware that vampires or even other creatures could strike the office at any moment. He also does form his own clan, the Knights of the Night, in Season 7, which makes him feel less like an NPC and more like a main player. One time he talks about having shot a werewolf that immediately turned back into a dog, and I was like, wow, what a weird NPC dialogue. But once I realized that this guy could be real, I started taking him more seriously. You think it's a coincidence he's hiding several weapons within the office like some Resident Evil game? The guy is playing the game and we're just watching. He knows how dark it can get, and he knows the enemies can strike at any time, like Roy did that one time. And it makes sense that he can't carry all the weapons on him, since there's usually a limit to the items you can carry, so he stashes them in his storage units scattered around the office. He brings his own food like jerky or water in his backpack. His inventory is basically always ready to replenish HP and mana. HP for health points, sorry, I forgot that you had a life, we're playing games. So what I mean is, he might be right. We're all suspecting Dwight from being this buffoon or this fool, but in reality, I'm pretty sure that werewolf story was true. Clearly, I misjudged Dwight. I'm pretty sure he sees everyone except for himself and possibly Michael as NPCs too. Actually, I think he even sees Michael as an NPC, at least initially. Because at some point, Angela gives Dwight a quest of taking over as manager. She convinces him that Michael is ruining the branch, that they'll soon see the game over screen. So Dwight goes after him. But as much of a noob Michael is, Dwight is unable to beat Michael in a 1v1 since Michael's got strong allies that boost his stats, like Jan the healer. And after all this, I'm not sure if Dwight actually acknowledges that Michael is a real player or just respects him because he's a strong NPC. Anyway, Jim is a really annoying NPC though, if he is even an NPC that is. His task must be to make the players of the game struggle, or something like that, with his constant pranks. He's always at his desk, at his spawn point, practically never moves, his job is mundane, his idle animation is locked into walking to reception to talk to Pam, eating some candy, and going back to his desk. I guess you could say that Jim is the prankster NPC, putting Dwight's items into Jell-O. I mean, he could also be an intrusive virus within the game that, if you interact with, your computer gets infected, because he does steal Dwight's gold when he hid his wallet into the vending machine, even messed with his in-game settings, like when he redirected Dwight's phone to his own. But games don't have random NPCs that are secret viruses. That would be horrible. What? Nobody would play that game. If anything, they have trolls. Especially in MMOs, massively multiplayer online games like World of Warcraft. And I don't mean the trolls in the woods that you farm to level up, I mean actual people sitting behind computers trolling, messing around to make the game experience, well, let's just say less fun for others. And Jim's behavior exhibits the one of a troll, someone who doesn't really enjoy the game, but plays it anyway so he can make it as miserable as possible for others. He doesn't sell paper to gain experience, he doesn't collect items that we know of. He doesn't even try to get promoted. Jim just messes with people around him. And the only time he does try to follow a new quest with a sort of promotion is when he switches scenery by moving to Stamford. But once he realizes that while the map is different, the game is the same, he's bored again. He starts trolling Andy this time, and I think I know why he's doing this. Jim likely took a super difficult quest once from a very old wise man with a white beard, not sure who, and that quest stated that he needed to win Pam's love, sort of like an escort mission, and make sure she doesn't end up with Roy, an evil boss that Dwight defeats later on. He tried for several years to complete the mission, but failed as it seemed impossible to win over Pam. She kept going back to Roy for some reason, and Jim ended up in the friend zone, which is an area that is practically inescapable once entered. And like, only 0.1% of the player base has ever gotten out of. It's an achievement many men still dream of. And without completing this quest, he refuses to move on because he's going for 100% playthrough achievement. Think of it as a Nuzlocke, which is the self-imposed fan-made gameplay of Pokemon games where you have a set of rules that make it almost impossible to complete the game. For instance, no healing in battle. And Jim basically said, no uncompleted quests. If I take one, I have to finish it. That's it. Ultimately, after 3 full seasons, he's able to complete the quest. I guess all it took was to cheat on your girlfriend. Did they break up? Because I feel like Karen was confused since she came back. Like, they definitely hadn't completely broken up yet. But hey, anything to complete the quest, right? He then continues grinding the game again, like becoming co-manager of the office, going to California for a Saber store mission, and even chase other playable classes, like instead of paper salesman, he tries the sports marketing class. But there is a saying in the gaming world, once a troll, always a troll. Actually, I just made that up right now. But Jim, even though he continues with this story, he never really quits trolling. He trolls almost anyone and everyone throughout. Dwight, Michael, Gabe, even D'Angelo when he baits him into playing basketball and ends up with a brain injury. Okay, so far we figured out that Michael is a newbie, Dwight is a hardcore pro player, grinding the game non-stop, and Jim is a troll. All real players. And you could argue that it was obvious that they were real players since they were practically the main characters of the show. Yeah, you're right, I guess. But so is Pam, kind of. And I'm fairly certain she's an NPC. Not even gonna give her the benefit of the doubt on this one. Let me explain why. This will only take 2 minutes. That's what she said. I get that Pam has side quests going for her, like art school, galleries, a fiance. So it almost feels like she's got a main character arc going on. But these are all just NPC cutscenes. You see, she starts out the game as a receptionist. A very boring job, to be honest. Very unlikely that a class like that would even exist. Repetitive task of answering phones and saying the exact same line every single time. Sounds more of a job for an NPC. Then something strange happens. As Michael quits his job to form his own paper company, Pam's AI breaks. She gets up and follows him. At first I thought, okay, wait, that right there is free will, so she must be a main character. But then she comes crawling back to Charles to beg for her old job back. And I immediately knew that moment that she stood up, that was just a bug. The NPC is unable to perform outside of her terrain, her own locked-in animation cycle of answering phones. She's struggling and wants back in before she ceases to exist. Now you might ask, why does the NPC feel the need to even go to Charles? Why not just take her desk? Good question. The answer is simple. The server already replaced her. You see, video games hate empty spaces. The second Pam's NPC model left the reception zone, the game panicked. It needed someone to run the, answer underline phone execution task, background loop thing. So it auto-generated a replacement NPC, Erin. And because of that, Pam can't just go back to her spawn point desk. She's practically about to be deleted if she can't go back, which is why she has to go through Charles first, a manager, and also the only person other than admins who can influence in-game roles and positions at the time. And I know she makes a sale during that time, but if you think about it, Michael set the whole pancake thing up, even invited all the guests. It was his sale that the NPC took credit for, in my opinion. So even when she ultimately transitions to being a salesperson at Dunder Mifflin, she can't keep up. And when the Saber update hits, she becomes completely useless. Think of Pam like Ada in Resident Evil. They're very important to the story, but they're not real players, only advanced NPCs programmed to assist the main characters. And Pam is there to assist Jim in his quests, keep his base in order, and stuff like that. So once the developers realize that her AI is struggling to keep up, literally can't make sales, they script in an unprecedented cutscene where she tricks everyone into signing that she's the office administrator, a useful job to justify keeping an NPC around. Still not convinced? Ever notice how nothing she does has any meaningful impact? Think about it. Even when she leaves the office to go to New York for her studies, she comes back to her same job, same life. Nothing has changed. How goes the old saying? Once an NPC, always an NPC. And I just made that up too, but don't forget that the one-on-ones with the cameras are simple cutscenes of the game that everyone gets, even NPCs, so that doesn't count. But even with Roy, she's not really making a choice, but it's Jim completing his quest by confusing Pam and eventually winning her over. In the end, she doesn't even want to move from Scranton because she wants to exist here, her base. But your duty as an NPC is to follow the main character, in this case Jim, to further support him in his quests, so she does that. And granted, Pam is probably the most functional and advanced NPC of the office, but not at all a main character. Obligatory, these are obviously just my observations that I obtained through oblivious watch-throughs of the show, and you don't have to agree with my opinionated ways. Anyway, here's my favorite NPC of the office, the security guard. A beautiful NPC, just perfect. So simple, so serene. He has no arc, no purpose, almost no lines other than some NPC dialogue. But what makes him an NPC beyond a shadow of a doubt? What makes him perfect? There's a deleted scene in the Halloween episode in season 2 where Michael tries to fire Hank. And sorry about the black screen, it is after all a deleted scene, but he fails to do so because Hank doesn't work for Dunder Mifflin. He works for the building. He's part of the building's ecosystem, a guard at his desk, nothing more. Later on, when Michael asks for Hank's help to escort someone out of the premises due to the previous conversation he had with the NPC, when he tried to fire him, Hank responds in, "You're on your own." Michael clearly had lost the NPC's trust status. One time everyone stays in a few extra hours to finish some work so they don't have to come in on a Saturday. And because Jim forgets to tell the security guards to not lock the doors, he locks the doors and they're trapped in the office. In my very first watch, I was like, did this guy not realize people hadn't left yet? Like, why would he lock the doors knowing full well everyone is still upstairs? But NPCs wouldn't think about the other players or what they do and don't do. So he just fulfills his role as the security guard and locks the doors at 5 p.m. The way he's coded to, that's it. If Jim had gone to him to have a conversation, he could have easily changed the course of the NPC's actions by selecting "Do not lock doors tonight." And Hank would have left without locking the doors. That's how the NPC logic works. Also, there was that scene in later seasons where the security guard just runs outside and screams, "This ends now," because he hears the car alarm going off, even though there's nobody outside on the parking lot. For an NPC, it doesn't matter if there's someone there or not. Once you hear the alarm of the car, that's his cue to run outside, say those lines exact, and then go back inside. One more proof, not that we need it, but it's kind of fun to talk about it, isn't it? I don't know, I'm enjoying it. An NPC cannot compute when left in a decision-making moment. There's this debate going on in the office, and Michael needs to decide whether they'll buy new chairs or a new copier machine. Michael calls Hank upstairs to make the decision for him, explaining whatever Hank decides goes. But Hank can't decide. As an NPC, he's stuck in the evaluation phase, or the computing phase. Minutes later, he says, "Let me see the copier again." And later on, when Dwight buys the building with his enormous gold, he's been grinding a lot, so he can, and upgrades the security guard to a coffee shop, Hank becomes a shopkeeper NPC and starts selling hot beverages and food for other players to replenish their health and mana. One more totally random NPC that we see very little of, Ryan's mini friend who Dwight assumes to be a hobbit, Troy. A clear NPC that's tagging alongside Ryan, which points to the idea that Ryan is likely a real player. But with Troy, there's more than meets the eye. He's quite mysterious, and the scenes he's in usually very quiet, and even when Dwight calls in his friends to select a junior salesman, Troy, for some reason, is there. He's almost like this random NPC that you see in games in different settings. You can see that in Dying Light if you've never seen the game. It's pretty amazing. But you always see the same faces, just maybe they put a mustache on him or they put a beard, but it's the same guy practically. That's because the game recycles their avatar. Believe it or not, Troy is actually a forbidden NPC of the office. The developers never could get rid of him, as whenever they tried to remove Troy, the game would break, so they just left him there in the files. They realized he didn't appear that many times anyway, and when he did, they usually were able to take quick action with a hotfix and maybe just remove him or end the scene. The problem is that Troy has a secret consumable that's strictly banned, that kind of boosts all your stats without really needing to level up. Troy warns Michael not to take Ryan to the hospital, indicating that Ryan was benefiting from this consumable exploit. He then runs away into the darkness, or should I have said off map, the way NPCs usually do. And I know you tried following them. I have too. Literally a second ago, the door opened for them, but for me, it's locked. Come on, man, there's crazy people in this hospital trying to kill me. Why don't you let me go through the door? That's a reference to Outlast. Anyway, that was it for now. In my next video, I'll try to analyze the rest of The Office. Let me know who you want to see, or maybe who's an NPC or who's a main player, and I'll check it out for sure. You've just watched Fax Machine 9000. Beep boop pop beep. Thank you so beep boop much.